Very warm welcome to the first session of our Youth Employment and Education and Training Inquiry. And we're delighted to welcome members of different sectors this morning with us. We have Kate Nicholls from UK Hospitality, Tim Balcon from the Construction Industry Training Board, Chris Russell from the Federation of Small Businesses, and Kate Shoesmith from the British Chambers of Commerce. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming along. I've got some questions for you, and I'm going to start. So thinking about the change in the labour market, what would you see as the big changes that may particularly be affecting our young people? Thinking about now, but also what we might see, say, over the next 5 years. Yes, yeah. Please do, Kate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I can start from the perspective of just yesterday we published our latest quarterly economic forecast. And we managed to factor in what's happening in Iran, which has had an impact in terms of our predictions for inflation over the course of the year. So we're expecting that path to not go back to the 2% as quickly as we did previously and to stay elevated for the rest of this year. But the other part of that was that there is a knock-on impact on unemployment. And we're at the higher end of a forecast on unemployment. So we're predicting it to reach 5.5% by the end of this year. And actually probably think that if circumstances continue across the board, not just in the Middle East, then that could be an underestimate of where we actually end up. And one of the most concerning features of that is disproportionately young people are often impacted by unemployment rates. We can see that across the board, businesses are trying their level best to stay afloat right now, is probably how best to put it. So whilst just under half of all businesses tell us that they expect and would want to grow over the coming year, they are concerned that they cannot do that. And when we look at growth, which is probably the defining mission of an agenda of our time, and it's the thing that businesses share most with policymakers, one of the big drivers to get to growth is productivity. And so businesses want to hire more people. They would like to be in a position to hire more people, but the simple costs of that right now are really impacting them. So just to give you two particular points around this. One is that when the national insurance contribution hit in April last year, 13% of businesses told us that they made redundancies as a direct result of that. One particular mid-sized professional services firm said that the cost to them was £170,000 on their wage bill. And actually, when they looked at it, that meant that where they were thinking about training and progression routes, bringing young people into the jobs market, into their businesses, they would have to pause some of those activities. So there is a direct correlation between those costs and what's happening with youth unemployment.
Thank you. Would anybody like to add to that? We've got a good overview there from the Chamber, but specifically UK Hospitality, CITB?
Yes, so construction is described in a sense by quite a fragmented labour market, in the sense it uses a lot of supply chain, contracting, subcontracting, etc., and it's a kind of a sector that's defined by 98% small businesses. So it kind of relies on that small chain, and the pipeline of work is really critical to the confidence of employers in terms of recruiting people. So over the last probably 18 months, the industry's felt as though it's in a recession. In reality, it's grown by 0.1%, I think, but that's converted into a confidence being very low around what that future pipeline looks like. And it's one of our board members described it as, it feels like we're in a recession, but it feels like we know when we're going to come out of it at the other side. But until there's that workload that hits the ground, then the industry is very reticent to actually take on additional labour. That's broadly where they are. Some of the points Kate
particularly
mentioned.
Young people.
Well, young people, particularly young people, because it requires an element of training. And when we're talking about costs for construction, the industry works on very tight margins. So, for example, just the insurance to take on young people will increase. So all those things are quite critical when you look at a project-by-project basis, whether that's building a small extension or a huge football stadium. It's all of those costs mount up in an industry that typically works on 1 to 3% margin.
Okay, I mean, Chris, thinking about what Tim's just said about, obviously, primes tend to be the larger construction companies, and then the supply chain being smaller companies. How are young people affected by this in terms of the impact on small businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just to build on what Kate was saying, we've definitely seen a huge increase in operating costs and specifically employment costs for small businesses, and really, as Tim was saying, small businesses operate at very thin margins, so they have to pass on the cost somewhere, and it's often the case that they will say they recruit less because employment costs are increasing. We do a quarterly survey as well, and in Q4 last year we found 26% of small businesses saying they are employing less staff than in the previous quarter, and that is the worst percentage score we've seen since we started this survey about a decade ago. So it is really having an impact. As well as sort of holding back recruitment activity, we do see quite often, so each year we survey on the national living wage and survey in May, so shortly after the new rates have been implemented. And we also, as well as the sort of quantity of recruitment, it also, when employment costs increase, it also changes recruitment behaviour to some extent as well. So when we ask about would you be willing to, more or less willing to employ someone with experience or lack or qualifications, our members often say, as the wages have increased, as employment costs have increased, we're looking for those who are more qualified, have more experiences, don't have gaps in their CV, and that often means that young people miss out. So it really does have an impact on recruitment behaviour as well as the amount of recruitment that small businesses do. I would just have a slight footnote on the employer NICs, because for micro businesses in particular, that's been offset quite a lot by the increase in employment allowance, which happens in autumn budget 2024. So that has really helped the smallest businesses, and it's been a real positive step by this government in terms of offsetting that cost for micro businesses. You also asked about the next 5 years, and I would say our members are concerned about the implementation of the Employment Rights Act, and I think particularly in April, when the SSP measures are introduced, this is going to have quite a big increase in their employment costs on SSP, and we've been calling for statutory sick pay rebate, which was in place until 2014 and during the pandemic, and we think that would really help offset those costs and encourage small businesses to hire more young people.
Okay, thank you so much. Kate Nicholls, UK Hospitality Welcome. What specifically has the hospitality sector seen in terms of their changes and the impact on young people?
I would echo comments that colleagues have made about the overall cost of doing business and the cost of employment that has increased recently. I think hospitality is part of, or has been traditionally part of, the critical infrastructure to provide pathways to employment for young people.
I was one of them.
I think many of us were. Our first taste of work is often in hospitality. Summer jobs, Saturday jobs, part-time jobs while we're at university. And we also provide supported pathways to employment for lots of people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, who are the furthest from the jobs market. That has been traditionally our strength. In the decade post the financial crash in 2010, we generated 1 in 3 of net new jobs for young people under the age of 30, and we are the largest sector of the economy that employs 16 to 24-year-olds, the critical period.
What's changed in that sector?
What has changed is the cost. So around 38 38.7% of our workforce is 16 to 24.
Yeah.
And employment costs are our biggest costs. We are a service industry. Our people are our engine of our business. And it takes, employment costs account for now 53% of all of our costs, and around 37% of our turnover goes on employment costs. Over the last decade, that's gone up from around 29%. So a significant increase in the cost of employment. In the last 2 years, as colleagues have said, you've had particularly changes in the NICS threshold, not the rate, but the threshold. That brought in just under 1 million people in hospitality for the first time. And they are particularly, because we disproportionately skew to young people, disproportionately impacting those first jobs and entry-level jobs for 16 to 24-year-olds. And that is because those workers tend to need to work or want to work part-time. And those are the jobs where the tax rate has increased by 75%. If you couple that with changes for whatever reason, but the wage costs have also gone up with national living wage and national minimum wage increases that are above inflation, that means we've had £1 billion of extra wage costs that have gone through. What our businesses are therefore telling us is 60% are cutting staff hours and staff headcount, because they cannot afford to fill the vacancies that they've got. They cannot afford to employ people, and a third of our businesses are cutting their operating hours, which again reduces opportunities. So those initial pathways into employment, there's twofold. One is for those people who want that first taste of work, to give them transferable skills before they progress to other careers, and also those who are using hospitality as their first entry point for their career in hospitality. Both of those opportunities severely restricted, and they are the most costly workers to employ now in relative terms. So those career opportunities at the bottom of the ladder are removed and are restricted, and it's simply down to that. The final point I would say is that, and echoing some of the points Kate made, post-COVID, we've had a halving of operating margins within hospitality. So the margins on which we're operating at are around 3 to 4% net. It means that hospitality businesses are incredibly vulnerable to any shocks, geopolitical, macroeconomic, what's happening in the Middle East, and anything that happens there where we have a further increase in costs, even if it's not in the cost of employment, because that's the only point of flexibility in the model, immediately impacts on jobs and job opportunities and investment in people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of quick ones now. So you focus very much on the demand side and the issues that you're facing in relation to that. Kate Nicholls, again, if I may, and I'll start with you, but I'd like the views on other sectors. Obviously, the recent events that we've seen in Travelodge is a real concern. Is that sort of, does that, you think, in terms of the image of different sectors, and, for example, women working on their own in the sector, would be putting people off, young people off in a career in hospitality?
Well, clearly the Travelodge incident that you mentioned, it absolutely horrendous incident. Travelodge has rightly apologised for that. They've instigated an independent review, and they are looking at their own internal procedures for security and safety of guests and teams. I should say across the whole of the sector, the security and safety of our teams is the most important thing, and also of our guests. So we take it incredibly seriously. We work really hard to establish best practice and good practice guidance to support businesses of all sizes and scales. Clearly, bigger companies will have their own internal procedures too, to make sure that vulnerable people working in the industry and staying or being entertained or looked after within us, that their care is our top priority. So we are urgently reviewing all of those processes and procedures in light of the case, and we regularly have dialogue with the CEOs of all of our companies as well as our small businesses to support them going forward.
I mentioned that I understand that Travelodge are saying that they were following industry standards. So what does that mean in terms of how you, as an industry sector leader, will be reviewing your standards around health and safety, around safeguarding? Safeguarding is something that we as a committee take very, very seriously.
As do we in the industry. Safeguarding is a top priority for us. particularly making sure that we look after more vulnerable guests, or we have steps in place to take care of security and safety of all of our staff. I don't mean just in terms of hotels, but also the wider nighttime economy. Vulnerable people, young people will be out in those situations. We keep it under regular review. We have health and safety, and we have established committees to make sure that we have got good practice and best practice. We're an industry that is 90% SME, so it's about making sure that we're supporting smaller businesses who might not have those formal policies and procedures to follow good practice. We have, as I say, stepped that up to make sure that we are reviewing and keeping them up to date, and that we're taking the lessons learned from this incident to make sure that that is taken forward across the industry as a whole. There are about 120 million people who stay with us each year. The safety and security of those people in our hotels is of vital importance, and we make sure that we have good and robust procedures in place to look after safeguarding. You mentioned safeguarding. We've also, look after modern slavery, child sexual exploitation. We'll be reviewing all of those industry processes and procedures to make sure that the best practice is followed. It's then down to companies to translate that through to their own internal security policies and procedures.
Thank you. Tim, I wondered in terms of the same question, really, in terms of how the image of different sectors will affect young people's desire to actually want to be engage them. What do you think from a construction's perspective?
So the colleges, if you take that as a indicator, the colleges are oversubscribed with people wanting to join a construction course. So there is not an attraction issue that we see here. In fact, the colleges, about 56,000 people who attend a construction-related college course will not get into jobs at the end of it. Almost 2/3 of the people that go into a construction course will not get into a job. So it's not an attraction problem that we have. The other thing I'll say about construction, it's a glorious opportunity for everybody. In terms of inclusivity, whether you want to be an architect or a senior professional, or you want to come in and get a labourer and earn some good money, there's a whole raft of different roles, occupation and opportunities that construction offers. Excuse me, and it's one of the highly paid sectors as well. So in terms of that, that's not the issue. The attraction is not the issue. The issue the industry has is absorption, how to absorb those people into those jobs. Okay. And that's when there's a disconnect between those in training and those in employment.
Thank you. Two quick ones. I'm very, very conscious of time, if that's okay. So we need to try and have as brief and succinct answers as possible. So still focused on the demand side, what are the supply side issues in terms of young people, and why we have the particular issues around the high levels of young people who are NEET? We'll start with the other Kate this time. Yeah. Very quickly, as I say.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things absolutely really important. First is what's the role of knowing what the career pathways are for where the job opportunities actually lie. So we find that sometimes there are instances where we have organisations, businesses that would love to bring in the next cohort, young people, but actually where the services are in the right place. I'll give you a very quick example. Suffolk Chamber works on the supply chain of the delivery of Sizewell C. And when they were first looking at the construction and the development of the site, they realised that the college that would be the feed through from that was well over an hour away. So actually, what did they have to do? They had to think about how did they deliver the further education requirements on site, and the wraparound support that's required in terms of transport, caring responsibilities, all the things that you will hear about, mental health support, well-being, and the jobs guarantee that's recently been announced. There are a number of chambers that are very actively seeking to be involved in that because we think it's the right thing to do, to bring young people who are further away from the jobs market into employment, but the support service is required. And actually one of the things we're doing is looking at how we work most effectively with partners, King's Trust in particular, to develop that, both the employment and the employability support.
Thank you. Tim, what again, from the supply side, why do we have such high levels of needs? What can we do
I think for a young person looking for a job, I think it's identifying where the jobs are. Okay. Because in construction, very often, and it's quite typical that the industry recruits from Facebook or somebody they met in the pub or a friend of a family. So there's a real informal recruitment methodology. And at some point I'd like to describe what we're doing with the Construction Skills Mission Board, because in the sense that mission board is actually collecting where are the jobs, where the expected jobs. So you have a 10-year infrastructure plan, which is a real a bonus because we have a long sight of where the jobs are going to come from. There's an intention to build 1.5 million houses. It will happen at some point, I'm pretty sure, don't know when. But it's making sure we collect those so we know where the jobs are. We can link that to the colleges, particularly the CTECs, and then we can provide that better advice to those young individuals about a route, an entry route into the job. So that's the programme we're doing.
Can I just add to that? I agree entirely with what Tim said. It's about seamless transition, and that's where I think we could look more closely to make sure we've got those supports and links as people are moving out of education into higher education, further training, into jobs and moving through those routes. A couple of things that our sector is doing. We have the advantage that we are in every high street, every constituency. They are local jobs and they are in quite deprived areas. So there's a benefit there. Hospitality Connect is something we've done to work with careers advice and education in schools. It's in 18 cities. We've had 182 schools involved, 4,000 work experience placements. We're then linking that through to DWP job centres to make sure that you've got sector-based work academies that take that through, and you need the transition through then into supported pathways in work. So I think that's an area that the committee could look at to make sure that those young people who are disadvantaged have that pathway.
Thank you. Chris?
I think the only thing I'd add is, actually 2 points. I think it's definitely an issue that when young people have low levels of qualifications or no qualifications, they are a lot more likely to be NEET. I think it's 48% of 18 to 24-year-olds with no qualifications are NEET, and I think that really has to be the focus, trying to get young people to level 2 and level 3, I think makes a huge difference, and I think that's really important. I think.
Are you saying, Chris, very, very quickly, are you saying that that's changed, or are you saying it's always been like that and it's still that's the case, that we've got a level where there's low skill young people, then they're going to find it more difficult, but not necessarily that there are more low skilled young people?
Yeah, I think it's stayed pretty stable. I mean, I think one of the good things the government has done since it's come in is trying to have more focus on level 2 and level 3 as well as on young people, which previously probably wasn't the case, if we're being honest. I just wanted to mention health as well, because I don't think anyone has, as obviously it's a very important issue and it is having a big effect, but conscious to keep my remarks short.
Thank you. No, that's thank you so much. I think Chris was the only one that mentioned, particularly in terms of the supply side issues in relation to young people there. That's fantastic. Final question from me on AI, and again 2 centre answers, please, and I'll go down the line. And I'll start with Chris this way and go down the line. So, Chris, AI, the impact that it's going to have on young people.
So I think, despite a lot of the stories out there, I think the impact has been pretty limited so far. As I said at just now, I think the impact is looking at low qualified people. That's the importance.
Okay.
It's not graduates being replaced by AI. That's the problem, at least for now.
Thank you. Kate?
We're service sector, so people deliver service and experience. So AI, these are jobs that are protected really from AI at the entry level points. However, AI is being used in our industry at a higher level and marketing level in particular to be able to make greater efficiencies, greater productivity, and to free up people to do what they do best, delivering that service. So these are routes through to employment that are AI proof.
Thank you. And Tim?
It's unlikely to have an impact over the short to medium term on construction.
Thank you.
But maybe at the professional level it might start to do, but at craft level.
Very helpful. And
I can simply say that we'll have a report we're investigating, and it'll be coming out probably in about a month's time, where we can share actual data of what we're seeing as the impact from business perspective on jobs.
Thank you so much. Steve Darling.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming today. It really is appreciated. We've already touched on the national insurance hike, the increase in minimum wage, and also the impact of employment rights. We were mostly covering what the immediate impact. What do you see as the long-term impact of those? And also with employment rights, that isn't necessarily set in stone. We've already heard from one witness about where there could be some tweaks there or some softening there. Any reflections around that would be really helpful.
I guess on the Employment Rights Act point, I think just to start with, to say that it was very welcome that FSB and I believe BCC as well were involved in negotiations with trade unions and the government on unfair dismissal, and it was really welcome to get a compromise on that, because that would have had a huge impact if it was implemented in a way where it was a day one right to protection from unfair dismissal. So having a 6 months qualifying period, I think, will make a huge impact and mean that small businesses are still willing to take what they might perceive as a risk on someone who's young, who might not have much experience or qualifications, and I think that's very important. I've already mentioned the statutory sick pay rebate. I think that would help small businesses a lot. I'm conscious I was here about a month ago and talked a lot about the rebate back then, so maybe I won't repeat myself too much, but I think that would make a huge difference. Finally, on 0 hours contracts, I think a lot of young people will be on 0 hours contracts because, I mean, if you're a student, for instance, it can fit around neatly with your your studies. And I think what is important with that is when the consultation is published and some of the details around the qualifying period, for instance, and on the other measures as well. So we're yet to see the details on that, but I think it could be very consequential if it's very hard for businesses to employ young people on 0 hours contracts in the future.
Thank you. And Kate, any long-term impact and then any flexibility employment
Yes,
rights?
thank you. I think the first point I would just make is that all of those employment costs need to be looked at in the round and collectively, and that often isn't the case, particularly when the Low Pay Commission is assessing the impact of wage rates on youth unemployment. They don't tend to look collectively in the round about employment costs. And secondly, there is the cumulative cost of doing business. So if things go up like business rates or other packaging taxes or other forms of taxes, that also has a knock-on effect on your ability to have some money within the P&L to employ people and to invest in people and young people in particular. That leads through then to whether you can afford to employ people, and the more costly you make it for those who are more vulnerable, further from the jobs market, more risky hires, those are the jobs that go first, because you invest in people who can commit to you for longer periods of time or can commit to you for full-time work. So I think there's longer term, there is that to be worked through. I don't see that is an easy solution to come out of in the next 2 to 3 years. However, when you then look at the Employment Rights Act, as Chris says, there's a lot of areas that are up for consultation. If you are a young person who is not in education, employment or training and is further away from the jobs market, then you usually, it's not always the case, but usually want to have flexible employment. It's not part-time, full-time, it's not a binary choice, it's usually flexibility that is needed, particularly if you layer in some of the mental health issues or health concerns that some people have when they are also compounding why they are not in education, training or employment. So we need to make sure that we've got those supported pathways, that there is flexibility in the employment patterns, and that we don't reduce job security by over-complicating and over-regulating part-time, flexible, 0 hours contracts routes through. The objective should be to make sure that those people have a pathway into work and that they have greater job security. What we don't want to see is something that reduces that.
Do you just want to develop slightly what you were talking about, the low pay commission, and them being perhaps laser focused on a certain area and not taking the whole package?
Well, clearly the Low Pay Commission takes their remit on an annual basis from government ministers who set it. It used to have a biannual review period. It's now very fixed in an annual cycle. So they are gathering information now on recommendations they will be making for what happens in 2027 before we've got the full impact work through of what's happened as a result of changes that were announced last year. So it's always slightly playing catch up. The remit at the moment is to take to maintain at 66% median earnings for the living wage, and 50% average earnings for the minimum wage, but working towards equalisation. And there's no ability to take a pause and take full time to assess and carry out the evidence that's needed to see what the impact is on employment. I think you need to look at broader economic circumstances, the impact on employment, and particularly the impact on NEETs of that cumulative impact. Make sure that the remit is broad, make sure that the Low Pay Commission are given direction from ministers to gather that evidence and take a pause and a time as we try and absorb the indigestion that employers have got from very high wage increases, large inflation impacts and other costs of doing business.
Thank you. Tim?
I don't have a feel for the Employment Act in terms of how it's going to affect the industry, because I've not heard the industry talk about it, which you can almost suggest from there there are other priorities that the industry wants to talk about, and that may be the fact that the industry uses subcontract and self-employment model predominantly to deliver.
But as far as the long-term impact of the national insurance, minimum wage rises and employment rights, does it trigger any particular trends in your industry that you're seeing, or is it just the immediate indigestion that they're suffering at the moment?
What we've seen at the cost of labour, which has been described earlier, has put people off recruiting an apprentice. So we have witnessed I'm holding back because the cost of an apprentice now is much more expensive, and therefore they'll choose to use other labour routes to satisfy that. At some point, the industry will have to absorb that. It will still build stuff, it will still carry out its activity. Whether it's just absorb that in the cost and they can build that cost into the cost of construction, that's probably where it will go. And there's signs that I'm seeing now, and they are not strong signs, but there are signs where people who have held off recruiting an apprentice, for example, are now suggesting maybe I can go back. But the key point is the pipeline of work again. It's that confidence of work looking ahead. That's the deciding factor.
Thank you. Kate, finally.
So when it comes to national living wage, we have seen it have a direct impact. So our survey of 5,000 businesses every quarter, the latest one, 72% of those businesses said that labour costs were their biggest concern. And when we specifically asked about minimum wage rate rises, 54% of the firms that have under 10 employees, so the smaller businesses, they said that the potential for there to be no differential in minimum wages for younger people would prohibit them from hiring that age group going forward, because they actually, when they bring people in at that age group, what they're doing is they're using it as a pathway, a route in, training them up and seeking to leverage the fact that wage level is slightly lower than the average for 25 plus, by the fact that they're having to put in the investment in their training and their development. The other thing I'd say in terms of the Employment Rights Act is the government's assessment of it says that the cost is now around £1 billion to employers per annum, likely going forward. Just a sound check and looking across businesses when we speak to them, that feels like an underestimate, because so few businesses are actually factoring it into their plans. I think it's really interesting what you said, Tim. A number of organisations, when they start to think about things like the Employment Rights Act and knowing that there's different start points for the different activities, they're looking to see who they need to take advice from in terms of HR and legal professionals. And those are a direct cost to them. And that's something that we just have to weigh up against. What are you doing in terms of your hiring plans going forward? Because businesses are being squeezed. And as Kate says, it is the cumulative impact right now that's really impacting them. As much as businesses really want to do the right thing and bring more people in because they want to grow their workforce and increase productivity.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard, the number of NEETs has surged to just under 1 million, and the CIPD say that 37% of employers are reducing recruitment for new posts, or they're freezing recruitment, and 74% of employers say that the Employment Rights Act, as we've just heard, is going to add significant costs to them. So in that difficult employment environment, specifically, what can government be doing to encourage the recruitment of younger people? Maybe Kate, start with you.
Thank you. I think there is a need urgently to reduce the lack of certainty around Employment Rights Act. Some of the consultations are due to come out, but that is fueling a lot of freeze by employers in moving forward. There's an uncertainty about whether tax changes will come again. There's an uncertainty around what the rules and regulations around the Employment Rights Act will be longer term. So people are pausing because they are not wanting to make any decisions. I think one of the things that was done post the financial crash, when we last had a crisis around young people not in education, employment and training, was an NIC holiday for under 21s. I think usefully could be extended to under 24s, particularly for entry-level jobs and those routes through to employment. That would take people off welfare, provide a supported pathway from welfare into work, while you have got employers struggling to absorb the costs which are inhibiting them from employing those people directly. And then back to the point that I made to the Chair, it's about those seamless transitions, so that if government is investing in sector-based work academies or work experience in schools, and you've got people moving through with pre-employment training, can we then make sure you can transfer them seamlessly into foundational apprenticeships and then into higher level apprenticeships by employers, particularly in sectors that are the solution to youth unemployment, like hospitality and retail and high streets. The focus at the moment from government is predominantly on the industrial strategy sectors and higher level aspirational training. We've got to have the pathways through. If these are people who are, as Chris rightly said, low educational qualification levels, needing to have basic training and basic skills, we can't afford to cut away those ladders to employment and just focus on the aspirational industrial sectors.
Can I just interject? I'm ever so sorry, Peter. Can I just confirm, according to our notes, apprentices under 25 and all employees under 21 are exempt from employer national contributions, insurance contributions?
Yes, I was suggesting that could be for under 24s more broadly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, those pathways that were introduced post the financial crash, they were very helpful in getting the NEET problems resolved. It's just an extension now would be particularly helpful.
Thank you.
Can I just
it's noted.
Can I just build on that? I think so. We have a similar suggestion that for a NICS holiday for employers employing those who are currently economically inactive, and we're basing that on a similar scheme set up for veterans at the moment, which gives employers and employers NICS holiday. I think that would really help in terms of employment costs. 3 other things I'm just going to mention briefly. So I've already mentioned the rebate on statutory sick pay. That when we asked our members directly what would encourage them to employ more people not in employment, 34% of small business employers said a rebate on SSP costs. And for those small businesses that employ 16 to 20-year-olds, 46% said that. So that would go a really long way. I think I mentioned the employment allowance in passing before. That really has helped the smallest businesses when that was uplifted before, and we would just like to see that uplifted in line with increases in the national living wage moving forward. And the third thing is around apprenticeships, and during the pandemic, the government introduced a £3,000 incentive for businesses to employ apprentices, and that led to a lot more starts. And when we surveyed our members on what would help encourage them to employ more apprentices, particularly young apprentices, I think 49%, so there's a survey last year, 49% said the reintroduction of that £3,000 incentive. So, and that was the top factor by quite a way. So that would really help small businesses employ more apprentices as well.
A couple of points. So apprentices account for about 10% of new entrants into construction. And around 50 to 60% of people that join construction leave within the first 6 months. So, and that kind of reflects the informal nature that the industry recruits. The big issue for me is the disconnect, and I'll come on to the solution because I think the solution is actually something we are doing, is the disconnect between the skills system, who educates and trains people, and then the labour market, who wants to receive those. And the employers are saying we don't get the skills that we need from the skills system, therefore they'll find an alternative way of training their staff or finding ready-made labour. They'd rather the oven-ready skills rather than go and train that. The thing that we are doing, I go back to the Construction Skills Mission Board because I think this is a real game changer, and it recognises, and governments recognise this and employers have recognised this, that we have to create a better bridge between those in training or education and the employment market. And the Mission Board is, honestly, it's a really exciting initiative where we've got the key leaders of construction industry with senior government officials trying to make that bridge happen. It's all premised on that pipeline of work, so we need that one. But in order to get employers what they need, there needs to be a training system that actually gives the employers the skills that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. But the employers need to engage in that because we know the best training programs are the ones that employers are engaged in that can give them real life skills on site. So if you look at Switzerland and Germany, their model is very much about an integrated approach between employers and that training system. So we have the CTEX, which has been a huge positive. Governments have put £600 million on the table to create a better skills infrastructure. Employers, that we're asking them to say, where are the jobs? You need to engage in this. There's a work placement model that we are now building into that training process to enable that transition from training into work. It's almost a try before you buy kind of thing. After we put the mission board in, then the skills agenda moved to DWP, so we were able to bring in that needs, and that's been a real refreshing contribution to what we are trying to achieve. So we have all the components together in one place to make a real big impact.
Do you feel that you're inputting into government policy on that? Like your expertise in this area and your ideas, is government listening? Is the DWP listening? Are those people charged with actually implementing those policies? I
do feel that's right. I do feel that when we're describing the problem, initially this was about how do we build 1.5 million houses, and we said to do that you need another 160,000 people. So it was very clear there needs to be a different skills solution than the one that we currently had. Through a number of iterations, and the industry comes together through its Construction Leadership Council, which is led by Mark Reynolds, who again has been leading on this one. His contribution you can't discount. It's been pretty profound. So we brought at the time it was DFE, now DWP, MHCLG, DBT, all in the same party, and say, look, if we're going to fix this problem, we need a different solution. So in answer to your question, Peter, yes, absolutely, because everybody's in that room understanding the same problem, and therefore we're trying to work out those solutions.
Just conscious of time. Kate, have you got anything else to add to the ideas that have already been suggested?
Can I just pick up what Tim was saying? I think the point there is we've got pockets of excellence. Things are working where they're really established. Our experience across the chamber network has been local skills improvement plans. That has led to a change where we've got 33 out of the 39 are delivered by the chambers. And what we found is that the chamber is a natural place where the businesses come in and they have a convening power. So the further education college, the higher education institution, the training providers locally, with the employers locally, they will naturally be in a place where the chamber is, and they will bring together their expertise to think about the skills solutions for the local area, so that we can establish those pathways. What we don't have is we don't have enough long-term thinking in those things. So every year you have to rebid for your LSIP contract, and that takes away a sense of activity that could be going on those skills improvement plans and the direct delivery. And for the most part, I think businesses really want to engage in this agenda, but it's an add-on when they're thinking about all the other things that we've already discussed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. John Mill.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. A key part of the government's response to the problem of youth unemployment is the jobs guarantee. How attractive do you think that is to employers? Kate, I know you referred to it earlier.
Yeah. So one of the things that we found that there is this sense of absolutely wanting to do the right thing, not just from an ethical point of view of thinking about young people in your community and how do you to get them into the jobs market. Actually, there's a direct business gain of we need this talent pipeline for the future. Number of businesses engaged in Kickstart, the predecessor. So we said this is the right thing to do to think about a jobs guarantee, and we do think that there's room here for the development. There are certain boundaries to be established around this. So there's only 6 areas for the first part. These are young people that may have never had any form of employment experience whatsoever. So I think the routes through that those people have to take are super important. I am totally with Kate about the flexibility and engaging people and meeting them where they are. So actually it shouldn't be that there's and this is only going to be 25 hours a week, but actually for some people it might be that they have so many other things to consider, whether it is health conditions, whether it is their own personal caring responsibilities, whether it's costs of getting to the place of work, to consider that actually the small bite-sized pieces of learning that they need to undertake and then allowing that learning to bed in the workplace is going to be super important. So I think we need to learn as we go. What we found with Kickstart in particular, businesses were there, they wanted to do the right thing. Young people were not yet ready or aware of the scheme. We have to learn the lessons from what went before.
Thank you. And Tim, in construction, any?
So I think, like any of these schemes, is it going to be positive? I'm sure it will be. It needs to be contextualised to each sector. Within construction, different to hospitality, we're hearing that today. And we are absolutely working with DWP officials, not just on the youth guarantee, but in other schemes to get those people not in employment or training into a process. So I'm witnessing lots of pragmatism, actually, and lots of what can we do to solve the problem. I'm witnessing a lot of that. I think the youth guarantee will be a component. It will clearly not solve the issue, but if we can contextualise it to construction, I'm sure it'll be another contributing positive factor.
Thank you. Kate?
Yes, we're very enthusiastic about it. We were one of the sectors that provided the largest number of Kickstart places for young people to provide those opportunities for a generation that was impacted by COVID. And we are optimistic that we will be able to provide those soft skills, transferable skills, entry-level skills through the youth guarantee. We were very pleased to hear at the budget that hospitality would be one of the priority sectors. It makes very great sense to us that we are, and as I say, we provide those routes through to meaningful careers. We have the most meritocratic system of training once we get those young people in. If they want to remain in hospitality, they can go from entry level to management in under 2 years with the investment that we can make. Or we can provide that route through for people to get those transferable skills, common skills that take them to whichever area of the economy they want to work in next. Our challenge, and I think this is, sorry to sound a bit like a stuck record, we do need to make sure that those transition points are seamless, that we are sucking people in, we are providing them with work and training that is embedded in the work that they can do, and that crucially the jobs are there for them when they come out of that youth guarantee. There is nothing more dispiriting for a young person to have a short-term temporary fix and then find that they are still at the problem end when they come out of that. So we need to make sure there's the support. I'm sure that we can do that. We have stood up again our industry bodies, our industry charities, we have Springboard who work on job-ready training, work-ready training for young people. We have the Licensed Trade Charity and Hospitality Action that are benevolent charities to provide that wraparound care and support. And crucially for this younger cohort, they provide helplines and they provide counselling and mental health first aid in the workplace to make sure that they have that camaraderie of joining a hospitality team, being supported and looked after, and that their first taste of work is a positive one.
Thank you. And Chris, from the point of view of your members, any comment?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very supportive of Jobs Guarantee, and I think the evidence from the Future Jobs Fund and from Kickstart, particularly for young people who leave school without high levels of qualification or with special educational needs, it's very it's had a very positive long-term impact, both of those schemes, on those future outcomes for those young people. So in principle, we're very supportive. I think we are disappointed, though, it doesn't go further in that it's only for young people up to the age of 21, and they have to be out of work for 18 months, and I believe the target's about 20,000 placements per year. When I speak to FSB members about whether they'd be interested in this, I think they see it as another level of pretty hard-going kind of engagement. So for instance, a lot of our members take on T-level placements or hire apprentices, but to them, someone who's been out of work for 18 months probably hasn't had a job if you're 21, and probably has some other issues as well. It's quite a lot to ask from an employer. So I think really we'd like to see it broadened out so that it's applicable for those who've been out of work for 6 months or so. And yeah.
Thank you. And then this final question, if I can just sort of throw it open generally, and swift answers if possible. So as part of the Jobs Guarantee, the government's offering grants of up to $2,650 per participant to cover wraparound costs. Do you think that's enough? Is there any other sort of form of support that you think would be appropriate? Anyone want to come in on that?
We're finding that we're going to have to work with partners to ensure, and that's right in terms of, so I mentioned earlier the King's Trust in terms of thinking about the employability support, because to Chris's point, most businesses, particularly the smaller end of the businesses, the person who is the founder, owner, manager, HR director, operations director, they're doing everything. Plus, they will be bringing in this young person and helping them through their journey. And nobody wants to get that wrong. So it's really important that you have the right services in place, because you may not understand from the surface of knowing all of the conditions that are preventing that person from having gained work experience previously. So the amount of money on offer is very limited. We will make it work because we think it's the right thing to do, but it does prohibit you from thinking about, well, what else could we do to support this young person, because there's so many facets to this that often are hidden from the surface.
Thank you.
It's really hard to say. Those employers that have got a pipeline of work will do this regardless. You know, so the number is irrelevant. It's those that's kind of lacking the confidence. And, you know, what we're talking about is de-risking the taking on a new person. So this absolutely moves towards that. Whether it's enough, it depends on the employer at the time. It's always difficult to come up with a number, absolutely. But one thing's for sure, if there's work in the pipeline, then this will be helpful.
Thank you.
I think the scheme could be more ambitious, and the challenge that we've got at the moment, you can't dissociate it from the costs of employment that we've all described earlier. The reason that you don't have these immediate access points where you can take and support a young person going in is the cost of employing that young person has increased exponentially over the last 2 years. So will it be enough to offset the costs and to de-risk? It will make a step towards it. It will help to be able to provide that pathway and supported pathway, but support costs, and so therefore as an employment cost again alongside this. It won't offset that entirely, and you can't get away from the cost of the NICs that are going alongside that as you move that person from a guarantee into meaningful permanent work.
I'm conscious of time a little bit, so I'm just going to agree with.
Thank you very much.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Whilst appreciating the challenges that businesses face, there will be a number of my constituents who raise an eyebrow at descriptions of their hard-won improvements to their employment rights being described as causing indigestion for employers. So can you tell us how the government can ensure that the jobs available are good jobs and that they offer the opportunity of sustained employment?
I'm happy to start. The vast majority of businesses up and down the country are doing absolutely the right thing. And I've mentioned a number of times around if you want to grow your business, you need to think about the productivity of your business and about your workforce. And that means treating your people well. And they really are. that we know that's the biggest, one of the biggest drivers of growth is how do we solve this thing that we've perennially talked around the productivity challenge. The difference with the Employment Rights Act is that there is a bunch of new things that are coming in, and they have to be grounded in pragmatism as well. So if we just take the feature around 0 hours contracts, there are people that 0 hours contracts work for, and we do have to accept that that is part and parcel of a choice that some people make. There are people that they don't work for, and we should find routes for them to find other forms of employment. That's absolutely essential. There is absolutely a need for some of this flexibility. If we just take the peaks and troughs of the hospitality sector in terms of thinking about the summer seasons and the run-up to Christmas, the same happens around logistics and deliveries. We know that in the construction sector that it's project-based quite often. There are reasons that there are these different contract types, so they really matter. What's important is that everybody from the outset understands exactly what is involved in this form of contractual work. That's what's really important here. And it's just the case of any form of change. Businesses are not as aware as they need to be about what's coming down the track, partly because it's such a long phased approach, the roadmap that government is talking about. And the second reason is because there's around 70 odd different things in there. It's huge, this programme of work. It's not an underestimate to say it's a once-in-a-generational change, and it will take time to adjust. So it's not about not wanting to do the right thing. It's about that knowledge and understanding and then investing in those processes, and that takes time, and it does cost.
Can I just build on that point? I think for our businesses, for our FSB members who rarely have HR staff, it's the business owner themselves who's not going to be an expert in employment law or HR or those sort of things. It is, as Kate was saying, very complex and so many different measures coming out at the same time. And the vast majority of our members are very, want to be as supportive as they can to their employees. And this might not take a very formal set approach with HR sort of in place, but they want to be as supportive as they can. And I think there's a huge risk they just get caught out because they're not aware of some of the technical details that they have to implement by a certain date. I think also, to be frank, I do not think the government are doing enough to prepare employers or small businesses for these changes. I mentioned that SSP changes are coming in April. The government still hasn't published transitional guidance for employers on those changes, and that is less than a month away. And these are very complicated changes, especially if you're employing someone on 0 hours contracts. So there needs to be a lot more time and support for small businesses and, well, frankly, all businesses to incorporate these changes as well.
Can I make a point and add on to that? I do think there's something around making sure that the employers understand all of these initiatives, because there appears to be a lot coming out at the minute, and regardless of whether they're being positive, employers are, they just want to build houses or build buildings. And actually understanding this is really very difficult. So that I take the point on that, Chris. But going back to your point, it's really important that we think about bringing new people into employment as a system. So it's not just about getting them into a job and then looking at 6 months saying, right, they're into sustainable employment and leaving them there. It needs to be a system of how do they develop their career, what happens after they've got a job, where's their career pathways, what support do they get for skills development. And I think particularly for construction, we employ roughly about 200,000 people, new people every year, additional people. We lose about 200,000 people every year. So there's this constant churn of people coming in and out of the sector. One of the reasons there's a churn is because of this lack of career pathway. It's something we're working on, so we know that it's in there. But my recommendation here is to think about the jobs guarantee and all these initiatives, to build that into a system of continuous professional development and employment thereafter.
Just echo that and build on it. I'll be very quick for the interests of time. I think it's absolutely right. What we need to do is to make sure that we have those transitions and pathways all the way through. In hospitality and similarly in construction, some people will choose to do it as a temporary job, as a part-time job, as they move forward towards their broader career. Others will choose to have it as a full career. We've put in place now, going from foundational apprenticeships to level 1, level 2, right the way through to level 6 and 7 now in degree apprenticeships, to make sure that we've got that career pathway, continuous professional development throughout the industry from entry level to boardroom. One of the strengths that we've got, 80% of our people who work in hospitality, particularly in the management side, don't have degrees. They've come through that pathway. So formalising it will help to address the perceptions of the industry as a career of choice and a good quality career. We need to make sure that the government support on the apprenticeship and growth levy and skills levy, when that is reformed, supports that in-work training and professional development. And then I think it's about transparency, certainty, choice, and I would differentiate between the costs of employment and employment rights. Good employers are not waiting for the legislation to change, or have been waiting for the legislation to change, to make sure that they are supporting their teams and they're investing in their teams. But as Kate rightly said, part-time, flexible, 0 hours contracts or small guaranteed hours contracts work for a lot of people in the industry, and in our sector in particular, where you've got seasonal employment. The key is, are you making sure that those people have got job security? And how are you making sure that people have got good quality jobs and rights while they are in employment? Over the course of the 30 years I've worked in hospitality, really proud of the fact that one of the things we've tackled is job insecurity. When I first came into the industry, 25% of our workforce were on temporary part-time contracts that were casual. They were less than 12 weeks. They had no job security. That's less than 8% now, because we've worked to make sure that people have permanent employment contracts. They may be 0 hours if they choose them, or they may be short-term guaranteed hours if they choose them, but they are permanent, and that means those people have rights and have investment in them.
So just very quickly, I'm conscious of time in terms of following that up. I'm pleased that job security and progression was referenced in those responses, because those are key pillars of what is good work. The other thing which is crucial to that is the role of the line manager, because as we know, most line managers are promoted to management positions not because of their management skills, but because of their technical skills or qualifications. So what more can the government do to ensure that there is support for line managers to create that positive workplace environment?
I think it's a really important point, particularly in our sector, where that's at an outlet level, and it's an outlet manager who will be doing that. That goes back to Kate's point and Chris's point about the need for clarity, line of sight, guidance from government about what these changes are going to be, because we are going to have to train and invest in our managers to be able to deliver a lot of those changes that are in the Employment Rights Act in a very short space of time. So we need line of sight, and businesses need time to be able to adjust. The second point is around flexibility in the apprenticeship and skills levy. We need to make sure that those levy funds can be used in work, both to onboard people onto an aspirational apprenticeship and then also to offboard them and move them into those management positions. And at the moment, there isn't the flexibility to be able to use those levy funds to train and invest in some of the management skills that you might need when people are moving into that management position, or to take account of some of these changes. So those are two observations I would make. The final observation is good work depends on you having access to work. That needs sustainable businesses, and that needs viable businesses. So we do need to look at that in the round, then we can make sure people can invest.
Can I pick out the point on the levy in particular? I think the flexibility of the levy is absolutely essential, and it was a pre-election commitment. So delivery on that is really important. And just to add, not making it a choice of either or in terms of what training is acceptable, because actually one of the things that we do find is that in terms of delivering higher level, either apprenticeships or management training, is that then provides a place where you can then bring other people in because of the progression. So if we just look at just level 2 apprenticeships, which we need more of, by the way, we absolutely do, there needs to be more paths in. We also need to think about how you then allow people to have the ladder, so that when they are in work, they are being trained, that there's funding available for that training, that there's clear pathways, because then it provides that place where they can move up into a new role and somebody else can come in.
Really against the clock, folks. So I'm going to finish it there, if that's all right. Damien Egan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, luckily, a lot of the points I was going to raise has been covered, because I wanted to ask about the barriers that impact young people from taking on more apprenticeships? Because if I asked the panel to be mindful about the point you were saying, Kate, around the entry level, level 2, level 3 apprenticeships, and I feel like even, we talk about post-COVID, but even before COVID, big businesses and small businesses were raising criticisms about the effectiveness of the apprenticeship levy. Do you feel, and can you go into more detail about how you feel these changes that are recently announced will make a difference? And I guess if the lessons of the failures around the apprenticeship levy have been learned.
The levy's not worked in terms of increasing numbers of apprentices, has it? And that's clearly a failure of the policy. So what we really need to think about is Tim was talking about how you match the supply and demand ultimately, so that there's a real understanding of what we're doing in terms of the education and skills system into proper jobs. I think the move of skills into work and pensions actually can help with that. Just joining up the policy dimension is super important. But when we look at it across the board, so we just had the announcement of V-levels this week, there are so many choices available. And actually, it's really confusing. And one of the things that we feel it's incumbent on us to do as businesses is to try and describe what actually matters in the workplace. And some of these qualification pathways and routes, they're important as stepping stones, but really describing the skills that are required is really important. We've seen some great examples of how, if we can convene young chambers and give people, young people, experience of how employers talk, the world of work, there's so much more that can be done that's outside of the traditional apprenticeship and education pathways, but the levy hasn't worked.
Can I just come in? I'm conscious of time and wanted to make some very long-winded points, but I will try and be as concise as I can. I think when you look at the data, there's a huge interlink between small businesses, young people, and lower-level apprentices. And since 2017, so the changes to the levy, but also moving from frameworks to standards in terms of qualifications, those three numbers have decreased a lot. So apprenticeship starts at small businesses, apprenticeship starts at level 2, and apprenticeship starts among young people have all declined. And part of that, the reason for that, I think, is the system itself was very much focused on levy payers who were, for various reasons, focusing in on the higher level apprenticeships. I think, to be fair to the government, they've recognised this, and in the last budget they did make an announcement to help small businesses and employing young apprentices in terms of training costs, and that's been very welcome. But to increase starts in all three areas, I'd say the thing I mentioned earlier, the £3,000 apprenticeship incentive would go a very long way in terms of boosting starts for young people and at small businesses.
Can I just make a couple of additional points? I think you're right to look at apprenticeships, but also if we're looking at the young people that this inquiry is particularly focused on, they often need help and training and support before they can access an apprenticeship. And therefore the skills levy reform is the critical one that will make the biggest difference if we can push that forward, so that you can have shorter, sharper interventions to get people the training that allows them to access a more aspirational, higher level apprenticeship. Often they don't start work on an apprenticeship. They come into work, realise where they want to have their passion and to build their career, and then access a higher level apprenticeship. So I think that will be critical and key to be able to do that. The second point is that there was another change on the apprenticeship levy. Employers used to have 24 months to be able to spend it. That's been reduced to 12 months. What that does is mean that employers, in order to use it, will go for the easier options that you can spend your apprenticeship levy on, and that deters them from the investment where you've got the workers that are needing the greater investment in support and training, tends to take it away from entry level, and it tends to move it towards higher level management apprenticeships. There's no disrespect to management apprenticeships at all, but if we're talking about the young people in this inquiry, we need the focus to be there, and actually having that longer time to be able to assess where you put your funds might help.
Thank you. So there's some key things in construction which I'm not quite sure how to reconcile, in the sense we've been talking about having a skills gap for a long time. There's about 50,000 shortages, broadly speaking, over the last 10 years. And yet the apprenticeship levy has been underspent. So that there's something there. I mentioned earlier that it counts for only 10% of new entrants. So it's not just about apprentices. It's about different routes of entry into the industry that gives the same level of competence. It might be over a longer period. And I think it's giving employers those choice. We have a new entrance, what we call a new entrance support team. And it's literally individuals that knock on an employer's door and say, can I help with an apprentice? And very often they'll say, yes, please, but I just don't know how to do it. So the CITB team, what they do is work with the individual, they work with the employer and the training provider to provide that triage, in the sense to bring them all together. That's resulted last year in 4,500 new apprenticeship starts. It's a labour-intensive model, but it's that support to the employers that very often it's, despite the fact they want to, just don't know how to get started.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Amanda Hack.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't prepared for that. Actually, I wanted to go straight back to you, Tim, if possible, because so I worked at the Learning and Skills Council in the back end of the 90s, and construction trades were we were in a shortage 2 decades ago, and now we're still in a skills shortage. And I had a quick look last night about how many apprenticeships were available in my local area. Thankfully, lots of them were in construction, so clearly that support is working. So how do you think that sort of supply-led as model and thinking about supply-led can change the way we look at apprenticeships and thinking about training young people long-term? And what lessons could you give to other industries about how you've done that?
I think it's something I mentioned earlier. The apprentices, without doubt, are probably more, say without doubt than probably, but apprentices are often, will stay in the industry longer. They'll reach a level of competence and more than likely productive, and I'm kind of edging my bets against that one, but it kind of makes that point. But it's very often they'll say that the apprenticeship framework is a little bit too rigid. So for somebody who's just doing small extensions, to send an individual through a whole raft of skills that they're never going to use is off-putting, and then they'll choose an alternative route. So it's that kind of, can we separate, can we just kind of have a unit-based approach to developing those skills, and that'll give those employers who want a whole range the opportunity, and those employers who want a different range. And the other thing is that different sectors have different requirements. I'd point to the Skills Alliance there, who are bringing different sectors and different requirements. It's the place where you can go for that kind of expertise. And I've been in skills a long time. I was also in the skills LSE. And this one-size-fits-all never does. And it's just being agile enough to respond to hospitality, construction, engineering, etc., etc.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Joy Morrissey.
You've answered most of my questions, but just on the skills system versus skills needed, and what would you like to see from Skills England to improve opportunities for young people? And has Skills England interfaced with your sectors to help improve their outputs? Do you have a close working relationship? And I liked all the things that you've said about, and you mentioned the skills levy reform and all these things, but I'd love to hear more.
So Skills England have a policy direction which is right, which is about making the training more efficient and quicker, so that you get an individual up to that level of competence in the smallest amount of time possible, so that they are more productive on site. That policy is right. The implementation of that has caused some hiccups, because particularly in construction, and I'm using the Building Safety Act, which is derived from Grenfell, the determination of competence now is really very clear. And actually what we need is those apprentices to reflect what employers need in terms of skills. And I think there's a bit of learning to do for the Learning Skills Council and for Skills England. They are doing that, by the way. They have put a separate issue to one side. And to be fair to them, they're a new body. They're working at pace. They're trying to find their feet. There's a lot that's been thrown at them. We as an industry need to help them with that. And what I would advise Skills England to do is just engage more with the sectors to learn from it, specifically the expertise, the experience that we have.
Thanks.
Just to add to that, I'd agree with everything that Tim has just said. I think particularly if you are a sector that is not one of the 8 industrial sectors. Skills England and the top-down policy approach has been to prioritise those 8 industrial sectors. 80% of employment in this country is outside of those industrial sectors, and particularly if we are looking at the ones that are furthest away from the jobs market or needing help, then it's the sectors that you've got in front of you who are the biggest contributors. So I think there has been a problem with Skills England prioritising engagement in those 8 industrial sectors that are not ready to go with foundational standards or entry-level standards, less engagement with sectors like hospitality and retail that could provide a big help. It's getting better, and I think the move to DWP has been immeasurably helpful in making sure that we're not just focusing on aspirational educational standards for a segment of the economy or workforce that might not be in that educational academic headspace.
And my final just question to you, Kate. You mentioned the challenges of not being in the industrial strategy and just this effect. And is there anything else you'd like to add on that as the final comment?
I think I've kind of said it all. I mean, I think while the ministers in DVT are quite clear and senior civil servants are also very clear that this is a prioritisation and a focus on productivity, it has become slightly more exclusionary when it gets down to lower levels, and you're talking about implementation of policy. And as I say, 80% of employment is outside of those industrial strategy sectors. Half of the country is not included in the place-making areas that are in that industrial strategy. The industrial strategy is right, it's great, it's focused on productivity and exports, but it needs the everyday economy to be brought in if we are to address some of the social and moral challenges of finding employment for people. And I do think access to work and moving from welfare into work is a social and moral imperative.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that concludes our session with the first panel for this inquiry. Order. Order, and welcome to the second panel for this first session of the Youth Employment, Education and Training Inquiry. And it's a pleasure to welcome in the room David Gaughan, and online we have Jan Feeney. David, apologies, I didn't say where you're from. The West Midlands Combined Authority, and Jan Feeney, who's from Norfolk County Council online, and David McCallum, also online from Skills Development Scotland. Good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to start with the questions. Can you tell me what barriers do you think young people face in your areas, and what might impact their employment, education and training opportunities? David, would you like to start?
Yeah, so thank you. And thanks for inviting me for this important work. The West Midlands has got its challenges with youth employment. We are one of the youngest, most diverse populations in Europe. yet we've got 29,900 young people currently in that youth claimant count who are seeking work. And that number's risen by 53% since 2020, March 2020. So we've got a stubborn and persistent challenge which is growing within our region. Our evidence in this space to understand the drivers of youth unemployment focus on 4 key areas of youth unemployment. Firstly, is attainment, what young people leave school with and where they're at, and their work readiness in that space. 2, the labour market conditions. We know that entry-level jobs are becoming fewer. We know our graduates are even struggling to find work in terms of what would be graduate vacancies, which are in decline. But those labour market conditions are actually impacting our young people being able to find work and good work. Thirdly, health barriers and the challenges our young people have got in terms of mental health. So 1 in 4 of our young people have got some form of mental health challenge or the barrier, which is a barrier to work. And we've also got high levels of those young people who've got an EHCP plan, currently over 19,000 within the West Midlands. And then the 4th challenge is around policy and the work of policy and the churning policy which impacts on young people being able to access work. The policy landscape is changing at a rapid pace, and the improvements are there, and I can see the intent behind those policies, but that takes time to bite. But also those policy decisions taken many years ago are also biting and impacting youth employment. The raising participation age, whilst the intent was strong there in terms of ensuring that young people could progress and transition into employment, sadly it has meant that some structures are not there necessarily to support those young people at those key transition points, especially at post-16. So those are the 4 drivers which we've seen in the West Midlands.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? Jan? Oh.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Good. Good. Fantastic. Okay. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. My apologies that I wasn't able to join you in person this morning. So building on David's comments, just firstly, in terms of Norfolk itself, Norfolk, as you're probably aware, is a large shire county. So it spans up 80 miles across, 40 miles in terms of north to south. So 2,000 square miles in total. And all of the factors that David mentioned in terms of the challenges that you face in the West Midlands around young people's ability to move in to eat are replicated in Norfolk. What we also have, because of the nature of the county, is that we have population density which is low and spread across a diverse range and mix of rural and coastal communities, market towns and urban centres, often with sparse access to public transport and or reliable broadband connectivity, making it challenging for young people in particular to access education and training. So accessibility is another major issue for us in terms of accessibility of provision, travel times to actually get to provision if it exists, in terms of what a young person's interests are, and also then accessibility in terms of actually accessing the workplace.
Thank you so much. And David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in Scotland, it's slightly different. I would say with the rest of the colleagues, mental health and access can be a challenge across Scotland. But I suppose in Scotland, looking at all our 32 local authorities, it's the rurality and the urban versus and making sure that young people have the same opportunities and to stay within the local areas as well. We do have robust systems in place to allow that to happen and support that across the partnership. But I would just convey that it's the same as other colleagues mentioned around mental health, kind of skills, building their confidence to seize those opportunities, but also to have opportunities within the local areas.
Fantastic. So what have you actually done about the different issues that you identified there? What's the work that's going on? And I'll go in reverse order this time. And if you could build into your answer whether the devolution settlements, this might not apply to you, David, but has helped or not.
Thank you, Chair. And it's Dave.
Dave, so sorry.
I can't comment on devolution, but what I will say that in Scotland, we've deliberately designed our intervention around strong early engagement at school and then post-school transitions. The key is key partnerships. So we have partnerships across, and not just us, I'm talking about third sector, local authority partnerships, private sector partnerships who all operate together. to identify skills opportunities within those local authority areas, informing our careers advisors, our developing workforce, but how those partners come together to support those transitions. What that's underpinned by and what's critical is our 16 plus participation portal, where we track every single young person from the age of 16 right up to the age of 24. We have got safeguards in there that we know, we can tell what their preferred destination is, what the preferred occupation is, so we can put things in place to support. But if they were to drop out of a positive destination or not transition to a positive destination, be it FE, or employment, the partners then step in to work together to support that young person to make sure that they get back on track to achieve a destination that's right for them so they can sustain it. It's not any destination. We make sure the destination is right for them. So we have 32 local employability partnerships across Scotland that work very closely together to pick that up as they transition from school, and how the partners work together. And we build on it year on year.
Thank you. Jan?
Thank you. So recognising this issue, in 2021, we developed a project called Boost, which we were able to pilot in King's Lynn as part of the Town's Deal funding for 2 years. And we ran that with less than £450,000 over that 2-year period, supporting young people who were NEET to move towards and into EAT, offering that bespoke support that young people need, that hand-holding support. And it's very much a convening mechanism, bringing together all of the agencies that work in the area to support young people, bringing them together, working with the young person and finding that right pathway that works for that individual young person, together with a bit of a fund within that project that enabled us to put on some provision that helped young people to move to the place that they wanted to be in terms of a career path. So short-term interventions that were unable to be offered through an FE institution. So it very much acts as a bridge. It's not a destination. The project itself, it helps young people to navigate the confusing system. It's flexible, so it adapts to their needs and helps them to move forward. And it enables young people to feel in control, that feels that they're not being controlled, that they can actually set their own destinations and to be able to work with us to help them to move to where they need and want to be. And it gives them agency. They feel that they're actually being involved in those decisions, which is really, really important for them. One young person said there's an actual goal to look forward now. There's a lot more hope. They always try to move me forward. It's not like I'm stuck in one place forever, but it does help young people to move into employment. We funded it since through UK SPF in King's Lynn, and also extended to Breckland, another district within Norfolk, which has been fantastic. Obviously, that's now come to an end, and we're needing to fund it ourselves with a little bit of support from districts over the next year. But after that, we just don't have the funding to continue. So the issue is very much about how do we create the opportunity, how do we access some external funding to be able to continue this work, because it really provides that glue that supports young people who are further from the labour market to move closer to and into. And this year we're pivoting the project to move young people into Connect to Work. So recognising the policy change and the fact that Connect to Work is actually going to do that work around supporting young people at the point they're ready to start job searching, we will move young people into Connect to Work. But for those young people who are not eligible, we will retain that job search facility so it can really help young people on that destination.
Thank you. David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the West Midlands Combined Authority has devolved powers through a multi-year settlement for skills, housing, transport and economy. So through that devolved role, what we've been able to do is establish an integrated employment skills system to help bring together aspects of employment support and skills to ensure that we've got more of a blended offer at a place level. Which is really super important in terms of how we bring partners together and use our convening power and drive collaboration, because for youth employment there's no silver bullet to this. There's multiple activities which need to be taken to address this, what is a very complex challenge for us. And our mayor embarked on has made youth employment his number one priority for the region. And within that, he established a Mayor's Youth Plan, which has got a series of actions within that. One of those actions was around creating 20,000 work experience placements, recognising that you're 6 times more likely to be in work if you've had well-structured work experience placements. And we're now at around 83% of that target. We're at 17,500 in hitting that number, and our Youth Trailblazers have been able to help us along the way with that. But within the Mayor's Youth Plan, there's also a focus on pre-apprenticeship pathways, and we're doing that through our programme, which is called Path to Apprenticeship. So recognising that there are a lot of our young people not apprenticeship ready, but with a bridge can actually move into good work through a good apprenticeship. And that pre-apprenticeship programme, that Path to programme, is focused on 8 key sectors. So earlier today we talked about hospitality, so we're working very closely with Compass Group, who've established an academy at Edgbaston Cricket Ground, where young people are actually going through a Path to programme to train for job roles in the hospitality sector, with the view that apprenticeship job will be at the national minimum wage, not the apprenticeship minimum wage. So we are very much focused on that as an initiative to bridge that gap to apprenticeships, and that's why the development of foundation apprenticeships is positive. But again, it's not a silver bullet to the challenge. We need to think about those bridging programmes. So Path 2 is one of our key responses to youth employment. And then the third area I just want to focus on, it came out a little bit earlier from CITB and Tim Balcon's focus, is that we've been looking at how do we build progression pathways and entry pathways such as Path to Apprenticeship based on what employers see as an entry-level job roles, and preparing young people for jobs in those roles. So a good example is construction. We've worked with construction-based employers and a CITB to identify points of entry into certain occupations, such as in groundworks. So at this moment in time, we have got training provision which is following our housing investment and infrastructure investment in the region, where we're actually establishing pop-up construction hubs to support young people into those jobs on those sites. And last week it was Women into Construction Week, and there was a group of 12 young women who were participating on that construction on that construction training at one of our sites at Smithfield, just behind New Street Station, to train and prepare those young women into jobs in construction. So that's the element of activity we need to do on the ground, and a range of initiatives, but it's a broad church. We've got to do a lot of activities and bring those together.
Thank you so much. Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for joining us. I've got 3 questions, actually each one for each of you, so I'll ask them individually. This is all around how do we ensure the success of Youth Guarantee? So to David in the room, we've obviously explained the work that you've been able to do being within a combined authority. So that's really useful. But how do you think how easy do you think some of this stuff will be to be replicated in those areas without a devolution deal? And what's the best elements of that you could share with us?
I think the replication of this model is really understanding points of entry into employment for young people and how we can replicate those models. I also think that large employers have got a role to play in this space as well, where they can support those areas where there is not necessarily a devolution deal, to actually show the way where, if I look at construction as a classic example there, we've got tier 1 construction-based employers who've got a national footprint. So how they can work with the local systems in terms of points of entry, and we need to we lean on employers a lot, and I appreciate a lot of the evidence we've heard already today has been about how employers can support the system. But I think we've also got to ask questions of employers a little bit more in terms of what do you see as the entry level piece, and how can you replicate what we're doing, what you're doing in West Midlands, and how can you do that elsewhere and support those local areas. So I do think there's a role there for large employers in that space around social value and what they can do nationally. I also think there's the learning we can do through our work with DDP. So the Jobs Guarantee is a good example. My own lived experience, I did a YTS to get into work. I left school with nothing. I see Jobs Guarantee as a perfect opportunity for a young person who's not quite yet apprenticeship ready to develop their employability skills for them to be able to move into work in the longer term. We've not had that for many years. And I think if we need to have a trade-off in this current situation where we've got high levels of youth employment, the trade-off should be there. It says, how could we expand the youth guarantee so those young people potentially who are not in that category being unemployed, but provides an alternative pathway into work for them based on their individual circumstances. But I do see there's an opportunity there where we can work closely with DDP in terms of what is a national framework approach, and then from a region perspective in terms of our own accountabilities, what's the trade, how do we work together collectively in that space so that the DDP can then take that learning into those other local areas. Because I do think we've got acute needs in the West Midlands and in other areas such as West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, the larger city regions who have got significant acute challenges of youth employment. I think we need to think about how we do work with those areas to tackle this youth employment challenge and then spread that further beyond to other areas.
Thank you. And Dave, over to yourself. So the Young Person's Guarantee has been in place in Scotland for 5 years. What's worked well and what's been challenging? But again, how can we replicate the learning in Scotland to those areas that might be able to use your experience?
So the Young Person's Guarantee has evolved. Kind of now looking at No One Left Behind in Scotland. How that's evolved is we do have employer networks that kind of work in schools to raise those opportunities, and they're very different across all our local authorities across Scotland. Those opportunities are different, and that's through developing young workforce. But I suppose the key thing for us also is how our local employability partnerships work locally together within those 32 local authorities, and it gives those partnerships agency with the funding they get to identify the need of that local area and the opportunities to make sure they're putting programmes in place to support people to seize opportunities they might want to go into apprenticeships or might want to take other training. The key thing for us going forward has been how really not one partner can do it alone. It's how the partnership all works together and we work more collegiately and collaboratively and say, okay, it's not for careers to take forward. This might be for our third sector colleague to take forward or for some local authority employability partners. So collegiate approach as well as being underpinned by the participation portal and our data is key to that as well.
Lovely, thank you. And finally to yourself, Jan. Like yourself, I'm in a non-devolution area, Shire County, very similar kind of experiences to what you explained in your opening statement. So what would you like to see from central government for areas like the one I represent and where you are working to see that benefit of the trailblazers actually reaching areas like ours?
Thank you. I think there is opportunity in terms of there's a lot of good practice that goes on in local authorities. I've mentioned Boost. There are other really good examples across the country where local authorities have moved to fill that gap in terms of supporting young people. And I think if there is a way in which the opportunity that the Youth Guarantee creates can be expanded to local authorities to give them that opportunity to be able to build on what they've done well and to be able to grow what they've got locally so that they can actually build on existing opportunity, learning, partnerships. All of those things exist locally. We just need the opportunity to build on it. I think in terms, of course, we would need to be accountable for it. And I think in terms of some of the things that we do already, so when we look at Boost, whilst we are not getting young people into jobs now because we've got to connect to work, then we need to think about what could we be accountable for. And there are some UK SPF accountabilities that we could still meet in terms of actually supporting young people to be job ready. So I think we could still be accountable in the same way. I think there are also really good examples in terms of where we've in the past joined up initiative. So we had Kickstart, that was really successful. We joined it up with Progression to Apprenticeships, an initiative we developed locally, which gave people the opportunity to move into an apprenticeship, and we'd be able to support a wage subsidy for employers who could do that. So I think being able to join things up then would be easier if we had the opportunity locally to have that pot of funding that would enable us to move forward with the Youth Guarantee. As a non-devolved area at the moment, we do feel that we are missing out. We're not at that table. We haven't got those opportunities, and we really don't want our young people to be disadvantaged even further. So anything that we can do in that space with government to bring that forward, particularly because we're on the DPP programme, so actually we are very hopeful of moving to a devolved place fairly soon, then that would give an opportunity to try some of that.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Steve Darling.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Jan first, David and then Dave, so at least you're aware which order we're coming in. So reflecting on the DWP and the opportunities, and we've already started unpacking some of this, so a bit of further dive into this a little bit would be really helpful. So reflecting on the DWP and how they could help with transition from education to employment for young people, what else could they be doing, please? If we come to you, Jan, then Dave and Dave at the end.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So just in terms of 16 to 18-year-olds, that's not my area of responsibility, I need to say that. So I would be able to provide you with a fuller statement in terms of the support that they could offer for that age group. In terms of 19 plus, I think we absolutely welcome the move of skills to DWP. I think that's really positive and aligns that kind of work and health agenda and the need to support young people, but also older adults as well, more closely into work and joins up policy, which I think is really important. I think that also opens up the opportunity to pivot adult skills funding when it is devolved or where you've got sort of devolved areas already and move towards activity that supports a return or access to the labour market, which could mean that there's less opportunities for employers to upskill and if apprenticeships are moving more towards a policy that supports young people, which is perhaps what we're seeing at early stages of at the moment, then we need to think of how we support those who are 25 plus. I think in terms of local relationships with DWP, we have a very, very good relationship and they are very prominent in terms of referrals to the projects that I've mentioned so far. They were also incredibly supportive of the Kickstart initiative locally and also then moving on to progression to apprenticeships. So I think that we've got really good local inroads into the organisation. I think they're also very supportive of Connect to Work. They have been incredibly supportive of Working Well Norfolk, which was an IPSPC pilot previously. So there is that opportunity locally. And as the Jobs and Career Service comes online and gets developed over the next few years, so we would want to work really closely with them around supporting that development too, and making sure that it really highlights those opportunities that are both local but also are accessible to young people. That's part of the issue.
Sorry, Chan, just from a local authority perspective, where do you see, if you could put a challenge into the DWP and say, you're working really well, but above and beyond, this is where I would put a challenge in. Is there anything that leaps to mind in that area?
That's an interesting question. I don't think there's anything that leaps to mind at the moment. I think we have a good working relationship and that relationship will continue to build and expand as further opportunities come on board around co-design and co-commissioning of work and support, work placement and work support opportunities going forward. I guess the only thing we could look to do more collectively would be swaps. I think they probably tend to kind of operate a little bit ad hoc rather than perhaps a more integrated approach that we could try and bring together. I guess that would be my one challenge.
That's great.
Thank you.
David, any reflections? You've already started to dig into this a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for the question. So we've got a very strong relationship with DUP within the region, and we've had that well established over since devolution in that space. We have a range of national programmes which are continually coming on stream, and that's where we create some of the challenges and some of the rubs where young people live in places that don't work nationally, they don't live nationally, and these are the challenges when we have national frameworks, national programmes which are developed and shaped and then applied at a regional or local level. That's where we see some disconnect. And I think that's one of the areas where working with DDP we want to work on what is that interface between a national policy and national framework approach, and how can we adopt that practice within the region so that we can actually achieve more value for money, integrate offers, employment skills offers on the ground, and link health into that space as well, because West Midlands has done its response to Get Britain's Working White Paper through its West Midlands Works, which talks about establishing multidisciplinary hubs which include employment support, skills and health support for young people and adults. So how can we actually work with DDP actually to enable us to be able to do that on the ground So I think that's where one of those asks. And then Dave's, I listened to Dave about his portal a little bit earlier. We would love to have that level of data sharing where we could actually create a portal so we could actually track where young people are actually at, recognising that DDP's role in terms of skills, employment and skills, there's still some fragmentation because DFE will still be retaining some aspects of that skills role. So data sharing at a local and regional level would really actually enable us to do a lot more on the ground. And how can we work with DDP as an active partner to be able to do that?
Great, thanks. Really good lines there. Dave, any reflections from yourself?
So, I mean, employability skills has devolved in Scotland, but DWP, we have a really strong relationship with them across all our local authority areas, not just ourselves, but also with wider partners. And we do work closely when it comes to supporting young people. So we might put in some additional support to support somebody who's working with DWP specifically. And they do have representation on the majority of our 32 local employability partnerships across Scotland. So they are integrated into the system and they do play a role, but mainly more from post-school into adult than from education.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. John Bell.
Thank you, Chair. What actions do you think might be most effective in preventing young people from becoming NEET in the first place? Do you think you've got the tools and resources to identify them in advance? If not, what might you look to see? David, if I could go to you first.
Yep. Thank you. And this is one of the key kind of challenges at the moment, because we are so focused on the challenge which is presenting to us right now in terms of those young people unemployed. We don't have currently a structured approach to how we're going to prevent NEET and understand NEET at a younger age. We're focusing some of our efforts in thinking about NEET prevention upstream. So what does upstream intervention look like at 14 to 18 before these young people actually become NEET, and where other parts of the skill system start to inherit that challenge. So at 14 to 16, what are the indicators that those young people potentially are going to be in NEET? We already know potentially through information, potentially through data sharing from DDP, where there's intergenerational worklessness within a household. You know, we may know that parents may not be currently in work, so those individuals are currently at risk. We know that if a young person has got a SEND need, that they're 80% more likely to be fall into NEET than those who haven't got a SEND need. So we start to identify a lot earlier in terms of what support measures we need to take for those young people. And in part, we need to some of the interventions which were around 10 years ago, which were kind of dismantled because of the raising participation age. Many years ago, there were place-based approaches around connections and a connection service to actually track young people. We've lost some of that, and we've lost the ownership of NEET and young people. And when we're bringing in new programmes, sometimes we're throwing programmes at a challenge where it's not coherent, it's not planned, and that's where NEET prevention becomes really important to think about, well, what are we doing earlier to understand the challenge, and what are the best routes for those young people then for the longer term, because it might be that the jobs guarantee might be the route for that young person alongside an apprenticeship, but we're not identifying that at that earlier point, and we need to start doing that more effectively.
Thank you, very interesting. Jan, if I could turn to you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned in response to the previous question, the issue of 16 to 18-year-olds and NEETs particularly is the responsibility of another colleague within the local authority. That's the way that we're structured. So I can provide a fuller written response next week around this. What I would say is that we have got a really systemic use of a Ronnie tool that we've developed locally in Norfolk that's used by most schools, and we find that really, really helpful in terms of being able to understand the likelihood of individual young people becoming NEET, and then to be able to work with them on that. It's just picking up on David's point around what we've had previously, so increased flexibility was a programme, as I'm sure many of you will remember, that enabled young people to be able to take on some vocational activity in those last 2 years of school, that sort of 14 to 16 age group, when they were able to go to perhaps an FE institution and study a vocational subject for a couple of days a week, and so on, which often supported young people who are at risk of disengaging from the educational system per se, and the opportunity to be able to have some of that activity back within the system would be immensely useful. That I do know, but I will provide a fuller response next week, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Dave, if I could turn to you. You're on mute, I think.
I apologise for that. Just to add to that, I mean, our key thing we can't take away is how the partners work together and how our partners recognise that myself within careers, that our team will support a young person or a young adult if they kind of come up any problems when transitioning to FEHE or employment. But it's also how the kind of partners come into that as well and support, and realising that some young people might need a different intervention to support them in moving forward. But the key thing, and I know I've mentioned it a few times, is we start to track people through legislation, every single young person in Scotland, when they basically go into high school. In that within that process, we can identify different risk factors with those young people and really make sure the support's around them early and as they transition from school and then right up to 24, 25. That information isn't just information from us, but that's information as they go through from school, from DWP, from FE, from HE, from colleges. There's a whole partnership that kind of feeds in to make sure that we've always got the right information on those young people, but also to make sure they're getting the right support. And I'm happy to follow up and write and to provide some more information about how the participation portal works and how we report in participation across our young people in Scotland.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Peter Bedford.
Chair, just turning to how local government can help the government hit its target of getting 2/3 of young people into higher level learning. Jan, if I can come to you first, because I think you've got some examples from initiatives that you were conducting in Norfolk. Maybe just touch on how local government can help support this, and also what more government can do to support you in delivering it.
Thank you for the question. I think this is apprenticeships that you're referring to in terms of some of the examples that were mentioned. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So we've done quite a lot in that space in terms of supporting young people. So recognising that currently we have far fewer young people participating into traditional higher education and progressing to traditional higher education, we see apprenticeships as a really important part of the jigsaw in terms of post-16 and post-18 provision in Norfolk. So we have introduced over a period of time some really successful initiatives that have helped to increase the number of young people in apprenticeships, including employer incentives, which we provided £1,000, recognising the additional costs of onboarding. So £1,000 employer incentive to help them to be able to take on a young apprentice and to provide mentoring support for them in order to be able to create some sustainability around mentoring a young person going forward. So should they be able to take on another young apprentice, they've got that kind of mentoring ability within the organisation. I've mentioned progression to apprenticeships, where we joined up with Kickstart, and I think that's really key in terms of joining up some of those initiatives across government, so that we end up with career paths and progression routes that young people can see where that pathway will take them. They have that clear understanding around where that will be, where they'll be able to get to, and that was echoed in the first panel in terms of hospitality and also construction. Also, we've provided financial support to apprentices through access to apprenticeships around perhaps buying a laptop or supporting travel. So trying to address those kind of key barriers to apprenticeships from each perspective, from an individual's perspective, from an employer's perspective, and trying to join up the system to enable young people to have clear progression routes that move from one to another. We're also have our own local brokerage service in terms of apprenticeships in Norfolk. So again, it was mentioned in the first panel, employers don't know where to start when it comes to an apprenticeship. We can hold your hand. We can help you through all of this in terms of helping you to move forwards and to work out which apprenticeship is right for you, which standard would work for you, and so on. We can help you with recruitment so that we can really help SMEs to be in that place where they understand the system. What we need is financial support to be able to continue to do all of those things. We absolutely know that they work. We can demonstrate that in our data in terms of the numbers of young people that have been taken on as apprentices over the past few years. So we know that employers see that financial incentive as a real kind of touch point that's important to them around being able to encourage more apprenticeship opportunities. But we need to be able to have financial support to help us to do that. We can't continue to fund these initiatives, and many of them were short term because we didn't get additional funding going forward. So that's where we want to be able to move to and to enhance that brokerage service if we get the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to a colleague. Thank you, Chair.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. And to Dave, sorry. Just wondering if you can talk to us about what we can learn from the different approach taken in Scotland with regards to apprenticeships.
Yeah, so apprenticeships in Scotland, we work with, we do it in two fronts, working so with our local employers and with big employers also to kind of seize on those opportunities. So for an example, if I talk about Workforce North in the Highlands, we have a huge opportunity around huge investment coming into around Highland and the Islands and Moray around renewable energy. So we've been working with big employers to seize on the apprenticeship opportunities, but not just apprenticeship opportunities around those engineering, but also around the supply chain also. We also engage with employers regularly. We have an employer service team that goes out and works with employers and speaks to them and highlights the opportunity of bringing on an apprentice and how an apprentice can add value to the organisation and the benefits both to the employer and to the young person. And we also are continuing to promote apprenticeships through developing young workforce, which is across the whole of Scotland. It's increasing our employer networks within secondary schools and within colleges. And we really try to promote apprenticeships with as an opportunity for all young people across Scotland and also for adults, because older workers can go into apprenticeships also. But the key thing is seizing the opportunities and us being agile enough to respond to the demand of employers, especially when they need to bring in apprenticeships where they need specific skills, be it around welding, be it around wind farms, electricians, plumbers, etc. And also we work with the training providers as well, and those industry providers to make sure that we have got the most up-to-date information and that we're responding in the right time, the right place, but also making sure that we, as apprenticeships are delivered, that it's equitable across both, not just from an urban location, but in our rural and our island communities as well. And again, apprenticeships are really supported across the whole partnership and our employers as well. And we celebrate it every year. So we've just had last week was Apprenticeship Week in Scotland. We had a huge celebration. We had the Apprenticeship of the Year. So it's really promoting the benefits of our apprenticeship of a different route into employment.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, did you want to very quickly mention in terms of apprenticeships in the West Midlands?
Yeah, so very three quick things if I may. So I've talked a little bit earlier about Path to Apprenticeship programme because we recognise the importance of apprenticeship as part of the skills system as a route way for young people into good jobs through a work-based learning route. We've also worked with large employers in terms of using their levy. So we've worked with very large corporate businesses who have deployed 55 million of what would have been their unused apprenticeship levy passed to us to enable us to stimulate the apprenticeship market further. So over 3,000 SMEs have been able to access that levy transfer fund, creating 6,000 apprenticeships within the West Midlands. So that's really important for us. But sadly, with the changes of policy and around levy transfer, well, it's not clear yet what the levy transfer policy will look like. So those large employers can't actually donate to that scheme because they might want to use it themselves. But I do think from an apprenticeship perspective, one of the important policy changes isn't just about the levy. This is actually about apprenticeship policy. It's building more precision into the cohorts who we want to focus on to drive productivity and growth. And one of those key drivers for us is getting young people into work. So more precision is very welcome in terms of that policy, in terms of focusing on young people and apprenticeships, because currently, or has been, an all-age system. But that precision is really welcome in the West Midlands.
Thank you. Last question to Damien Egan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to ask a question. It came up on the last panel, which was about the coordination of local demand with the supply of skills. And I'd ask you to think about this in each of your respective areas, but also with regard to how further education can help with that provision and what changes you may like to see within the further education sector. David.
Thank you. So, place-based approach, really, really important, and thinking about those places and the labour market challenges within each of those places. And that's why we work very closely with our local authority colleagues in terms of what provisions should we work in partnership to commission at a local level, where we have the powers to be able to do that through adult skills, for instance, and through employment support. So there's very much a clear partnership role between us and our local authorities, which then work with their local partners within their local areas. But understanding local labour market needs is also really important, and that relationship between ourselves, again, with the local authorities, identifying where they're seeing those priorities in terms of those sectors, but also what they're seeing in terms of the foundation economy, because we know the high growth sectors are well documented through the industrial strategy. What about the foundation economy that needs hospitality on the ground, construction on the ground, health and care on the ground, and how does that inform planning? And that then place-based approach then includes the collaboration with FE and the colleges in terms of what are their 16 to 19 programmes, what do they actually seek out to do, what are they seeking out to achieve, how closely aligned are those 16 to 19 study programmes to labour market need. Now, through our work in the West Midlands, we are developing a college compact with our colleges, which actually focuses on what we invest with colleges, but also how they can support the local labour market in terms of their skills offers to support transitions for young people into those jobs. So there's clear alignment.
David, thank you. Dave?
Yep. I just want to say something. We've got 3 different routes into apprenticeships in Scotland. We've got foundation apprenticeships, which start in school, modern apprenticeships, and graduate apprenticeship level apprenticeships, which really help bolster the important apprenticeships across Scotland. Just wanted to say that, Chair. I do apologise. In Scotland also, in Scotland, we have we work with our local economic skills planning leads, and also within Skills Development Scotland, we have regional skills planning leads who work with those local authorities and employers to identify the gaps and the opportunities across Scotland. They then feed it into kind of what we call the skills planning model that kind of feeds back into local employability partnerships, into schools, into the colleges, so that together as a system that we can try and respond to those needs and try and respond at pace. And our colleges feed into that clearly, and our local colleges across Scotland try and alter their curriculum to support those opportunities that come up. Whether it be in Forth Valley, down in Falkirk, or up in Shetland, we try and give specific skills and economic information to try and support their planning for their provision.
Thank you, Dave. And Jan.
Thank you. Building on David's point around place-based approach is really, really important. And obviously, we don't have a devolution of the adult skills funding currently. But what we do is to work with our FE providers in particular to bring them together to try to begin to develop that systemic approach to delivering the adult skills funding within Norfolk. So we don't hold the purse strings, but if we can bring them together and we can create that start of a journey to take those colleges, particularly on that journey with us, to build a system whereby we are making the most use of the adult skills funding in terms of supporting people to employment, then that's a really good starting point in terms of building that relationship. And that's been incredibly positive in terms of the response that we've had from our FE providers, so that we are working more together to make the best use of the funding that's available, and that we will be able to translate that into commissioning activity when the adult skills funding comes to us. I would say that they, in terms of colleges around flexing their curriculum, they are not unwilling to flex the curriculum if there are other demands. Part of the challenge will be facilities, and part of the challenge will be tutor recruitment and retention. That's a massive challenge in some areas, some sectors, particularly engineering, for example, particularly construction, where tutors can earn a great deal more being in industry than being in FE. We have worked with our colleges on that and developed some programmes whereby we've got some perhaps joint recruitment activity going on. We've got joint marketing that we've had in the past, whereby we're trying to attract a wider pool of talent into FE, regardless of which institution they end up teaching at. And we were in the process of developing another project around supporting the pay differential between tutor salaries and those that they could receive in the open marketplace. Again, we haven't had the opportunity to take that forward at the moment because we haven't got devolution and an investment fund.
Thank you.
I think colleges are very happy
and we're going to have
respond.
I'm ever so sorry. We're
sorry, I apologise.
I'm ever so sorry. So we've crashed the pips, as they say. So the bell has gone for the start of business in the House. So I'm going to conclude this session. It has been fascinating. Thank you so much to everyone for their contributions. Order, order.